Hello! How is everyone doing? I hope you're doing great. I am putting the free guide to accompany this lecture today in the comments of this video. So, let me find it. Here we go. Alright, so you can go and download a free copy of a PDF file that will go along with the lecture that we have today. It's in the comments below. So go ahead and download that before we get started. So today we're going to talk about understanding infant attachment. And next week I'm going to do a follow-up lecture to this one on building secure infant attachment. And so today we're really just going to talk about the foundations of the theory and like what it means and how it works. And then next time I'm going to actually give tips on how to go about building secure attachment with an infant or child. All right, so here we go. So if you look on the first page of your handout, it's a very basic description of what attachment theory is. Attachment theory was created in the late 1940s by a British psychologist named Dr. John Bowlby. It was later carried on by one of his pupils, Mary Ainsworth, who was an American-Canadian psychologist, and she has several. I mean, both of them have been heavily cited when you talk about attachment theory. And they both have done significantly amazing things to add to this field. But it's not just them. So it's not just John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. Thousands of research studies have been conducted over the last 70 years that have attempted to validate this theory, and they have validated this theory of attachment. So, what is it? Attachment is used to explain the bond between a primary caregiver and a child. And so, back in the 1940s when this was started, really Bowlby and even the beginning in the beginning of Ainsworth's studies, they were focusing on the mother. So the bond between mother and child. And the reason for that is it was the 1940s, 1950s, and mothers were the primary caregivers for their children. Now we know that attachment is really used to explain the bond between a primary caregiver, mother, father, grandmother, aunt, uncle, grandfather, child care provider, babysitter, whoever is with the child the majority of time is the person who is the primary caregiver. And sometimes some children have multiple primary caregivers. So some children have attachment relationships with both parents, or they have a stronger one with one parent and less strong with the other parent, or they have attachment relationships with their child care provider and their mom and their dad and their grandma and their aunt, right? So it's about the people who are around the child the most and the bond that they have with this child. And so what this means is that babies, and especially small infants, that you should surround your infant with people who are able, like physically and emotionally able, to be consistently sensitive with your infant. Because if they're spending any amount of time with them, then they need to be able to work towards developing this secure attachment with your child. So babies and infants use the attachment bonds that they create with their primary caregivers to downregulate stress. So they feel distress throughout the day, and they use the bonds that they have with their, I'm just going to give the example of with their mom. So they use the bond that they have with their mom to help them get through the distress. So let's think about how that works. So babies experience distress all day long, all different kinds of distress. So the very typical distress, like they're hungry, they need their diaper changed, they want to go to sleep, right? To sometimes distress is not as typical, like they're just lonely. They want to be held. They don't want to be away from you. They're scared of a noise. They're scared of their environment. Whatever the reason for the distress, babies experience distress and then they cry. That is the only way they know to let you know that they are experiencing distress. They cry. So the ways that the caregiver, whoever is with the baby, the ways that the primary caregiver responds to the child starts to develop this attachment bond with the child. And sometimes this attachment bond is very secure, and sometimes the attachment bond is insecure. And so how does that even work? All right. Well, if a caregiver is consistently sensitive and responsive, so there's this idea of being responsive to infants when they're in distress. If the caregiver is consistently sensitive, every single time a baby is in distress, they respond quickly and sensitively and kindly, that child is likely to develop a secure attachment to that primary caregiver. They then use that secure attachment that they have with their primary caregiver to downregulate their future stress that they experience. So I have 4 children. My youngest is, 21 months. A really great example of this is my youngest child his name is Rex, like a dinosaur, R-E-X. And Rex, when he was about 4 months old, he didn't really cry very often when he was hungry. Instead, he would start this small coughing fit, you could call it. He would be hungry and he'd go at 4 months old. And then I would feed him. And that would be it. If he started the coughing and I didn't feed him right away, because sometimes we were like, is he really coughing to let us know he's hungry? Like, this is weird. So sometimes we would wait, and he would cough, and he would cough, and he would cough, and I wouldn't feed him. And then he'd start crying, just like he did months before whenever he was hungry. And so what's happening there is the first 3 or 4 months of his life, every single time he cried, I responded. Every single time he was letting me know that he was hungry, I responded by feeding him. Instantly. I would immediately, as quickly as I could, get to him, feed him. It got to the point where he felt so much security and safety in our relationship that he didn't feel the urge to scream his head off anymore when he was hungry, because he trusted that I was going to attend to him. And so he would just do a cough. This went on for months, and it was quite hilarious, until he could start really telling us, with either sign language or verbally, that he was actually hungry, like he does now. More. But then it was quite funny to us, and us is my husband and the rest of our family. But it was very clear to me that was a attachment-related behavior, that he trusted that I would help him, and so he didn't feel like he had to scream and yell anymore when he was hungry. He knew that I would be there, so he would just cough a little bit, and then I would be there. I would feed him. So babies use the bond that they created. They start to develop these internal working models in their brains. They're sometimes called schemas by people, and they develop these internal working models of how other human beings are. So we're in Rex's brain right now. You ready? So Rex is 2 months old. Well, every time I cry, Mom comes and feeds me. Every time I cry, Mom comes and picks me up and tries to figure out what's wrong with me. 3 months old. Every time I cry, Mom comes, well, humans, other human adults, they're not so bad. They're actually good people. They're probably good intentioned. I mean, my world is really small, but all the people that tend to me, my mom and my dad and those other big kids of mine, they're in our house, they all are pretty nice to me. I bet you other people are good. I'll bet you that other people are good intentioned. And so the bond that you create, the safety and security that the primary caregiver creates with the baby starts to create these internal working models in their brains about how other human beings must be. And so if they believe that you are trustworthy, that you are reliable, that you are positive, then they start to think that the world is filled with trustworthy, reliable, positive people. And they start to have positive views of other people. And this is how the bond that you create with your infant in the first 18 months to 3 years of life, well, 0 to 18 months what's what some people say, and others would say 0 to 3 years. The bond that you create with them during those first few years of life, they use that bond to develop friendships, romantic relationships, acquaintanceships with all other people that they interact with forever. I mean, think about it. As a baby, you grow up thinking that other people are good intentioned. Then you go to kindergarten and you think that other people are good intentioned. This helps you make friends with other people because you don't think that there's anything wrong with them. The other part of this is that you start to view yourself, and by you I mean baby, as an infant. An infant starts to view him or herself as positive, as good, as loved, as lovable, which is a difference, right? Loved and lovable. So they start to think that they are loved by these other people. They start to develop these internal working models about themselves. So as a baby, my mom always comes when I need her. She's very responsive. My dad is very responsive to me. He's positive. He's sensitive. He's caring. I'll bet other people are positive, sensitive, caring. And, I'm probably a pretty cool person myself. I'm probably lovable. I think I'm valuable. I think other people like me. And so then you take this attachment security with you throughout life. And as you are a preschooler, elementary school kid, middle schooler, high schooler, adult, and you're interacting with other people, if you have a strong attachment security foundation from childhood, when you're engaging with other people, you start to think things like, well, I'm a positive, trustworthy, lovable person, so other people are probably going to like me. And other people are positive, trustworthy, lovable people, and so I am probably going to like them. So it's easier for you as a child, as a young adult, as an adult, to make friends, to keep friendships, to have romantic relationships at any stage, to keep and maintain those romantic relationships, and to have good family relationships, to have good work relationships. People who have secure attachments experience a wide variety of benefits. And I'm going to talk about those in a lot more detail next week when I talk about how to actually build a secure attachment with your baby. So if you want to go to the second page of the handout, you can see that on the left-hand side, I've got this matriculation of a parent who responds in a positive and loving way. And on the right side, a caregiver who either responds inconsistently, which is not good. So sometimes they're loving, sometimes they're not loving. Sometimes they're sensitive, sometimes they're frustrated. Or never responds in a positive, loving way. Right? So both are bad. Both are not the ideal. And so let's go through it together. So the baby experiences some kind of distress and cries. The caregiver on the left responds quickly in a positive and loving way. The baby begins to trust that the caregiver will help. The caregiver continues to quickly and sensitively respond to baby every single time the baby is in distress. The baby uses the trust that is built with his or her caregiver to develop a secure attachment style, allowing the baby, and this is key, allowing the baby to view others as trustworthy and the world as a positive place to be. And something that I would add there is allowing the baby to view him or herself as loved and lovable. On the right-hand side, however, we have the baby experiences some kind of distress and cries. The caregiver either responds too slowly, responds insensitively, or allows the baby to cry it out, which is very popular. The baby's distress is still high. It doesn't go down. Right? On the left side, the baby's distress goes down. On the right side, the baby's distress stays or even increases. Baby is unsure if caregiver can help or is willing to help. Caregiver continues to insensitively respond to baby or is inconsistent, sometimes reacting one way and other times reacting a different way. So the baby doesn't know if I do this, mom or dad or grandma or child care provider will do this, right? As adults, we want to know how people are going to behave when we react, when we communicate with them. I mean, as adults, we want this. Babies want it too, right? As an adult, you want to know that if you say A, B, and C to your husband, that your husband is going to respond in a certain way. You want to know that. Babies want to know too, that when they are in distress, that you are going to help them. And that they are sure, they know how you're going to react. And when they don't know, it creates distress in their bodies. So once the inconsistency continues to happen or the non-responsiveness continues to happen, the baby loses trust in the caregiver and can develop an insecure attachment style, causing the baby to either feel anxiety about or avoidance towards other people and the world. And so when Mary Ainsworth classifies people as in their attachment styles, and when she classifies them, she groups them into 4 groups. And so she says that they're secure is one group, and then there's 3 kinds of insecure attachment. There's anxious, preoccupied, dismissive, and fearful. Dismissive and fearful both have high avoidance. Anxious, preoccupied is characterized by high anxiety. And so if you watched the adult attachment, Understanding Adult Attachment mini lecture from several weeks ago, you can find it on our Facebook page if you missed it, you can hear a lot more about how this manifests into adult attachment. But yes, so this is how attachment is developed in babies. It is based on the reactions that parents have, or that primary caregivers, whoever that may be, have to infants during times of distress. After about 18 months to 3 years of this consistent responding or inconsistent responding or negative responding, babies develop, well, they're now toddlers, they develop a attachment style. This is a foundational attachment style. They carry this attachment style with them for the rest of their life and it impacts how they interact and communicate and are able to form relationships with other human beings till death, forever. Now, when I tell people that, a lot of times they say, so by 18 months, you have an attachment style and then it never changes? No. It's a foundation. So you create this foundational attachment style. Many of us have the same exact attachment style now as adults as you did when you were 18 months. Many of us do. But attachment can change. It is malleable. It can go from secure to insecure. Traumatic life experiences, death of a parent, divorce of a family, your house burns down, you move around too much. Or there can be everyday trauma, an emotionally distant parent. Having these life experiences can cause you to go from a secure attachment to an insecure attachment. But having those traumatic life experiences is not indicative of changing your attachment. It doesn't mean you will. It's, again, all about how your primary caregiver, your attachment figure, reacts to you during those traumatic life experiences. So that's why you know people whose parents divorced and they seem like their lives were totally ruined by it. And then you know other people whose parents divorced and they seem fine. It is likely due to the communication that occurred between them and their primary caregiver during the traumatic life experience. Saying that, you could also have an insecure attachment as a small infant, and you can develop security. You can earn security. The relationship that you have with your primary caregiver has to change. So your primary caregiver has to change his or her ways and work really hard at banking that security in you, whether you are a preschooler, elementary school child, high school child, adult. But it is possible. There are many intervention programs. There's attachment therapy. There are lots of different resources that I will include in a blog post on relationshipslovehappiness.com tomorrow that you can use if you have an insecure attachment or you have a child who has an insecure attachment. There are behaviors that you can enact to help build more security. But yes, that is the very brief, very basic understanding of infant attachment. And like I said in the beginning of this video, next Thursday at 10 a.m., I will be talking about how to build secure attachment with your baby in another Facebook Live mini lecture. And you can find that on our Facebook page at facebook.com/relationships love happiness. Have a good afternoon.